Hello, everyone. Welcome. Our first live session of the year. It's very exciting. Okay, so we're going to be chatting about goals, and depending on your thoughts about goals, you might be like, ugh, goals. We had a few votes in the group that said, ugh, goals. Other people are like, oh my gosh, can't wait to set a goal. Love growth, love goals, love self-improvement. And maybe you fall somewhere in between. One of the votes that we got quite a few of as well in the group, when I did a poll on goal setting, was this idea that goals have just never really worked for me. So in theory, maybe I'd like to set a goal, but like in the past, it hasn't really worked for me. So we're going to be chatting about all of these things. Before we get started, I just want to let you know that I have a workshop on this on the 27th and 28th of January. I will link it in this live session in the comments. But we'll be doing 2 days with an hour each. So 2 hours split over 2 days. It's a free workshop, and we'll be going through setting an actual goal for yourself, going through why you might want to set a goal, what kind of goal, because there are different kinds of goals, what is appropriate for you, how to pick something that actually is meaningful to you, that feels like it is actually going to direct your life in a way that actually matters to you. It's not like this arbitrary thing or just because you should set a goal, you know. So we're going to be setting a goal. We're going to be talking about the why of goals, how to make them actually meaningful and matter to your life. And we're going to be talking about the resistance that comes up to setting the goal and to actually doing the things that are involved in the goal, and how we can navigate that better, as well as looking at relationships and resources that can support us in that journey. So let's think about what a goal actually is. Like, if we're thinking about should I set a goal or not, it's important to know what that is. And people have different ideas of what a goal is, but essentially we're just thinking of they define it as an aim or a desired result. So in some sense, I just think of it as like we're directing our time and attention and resources in a particular direction, instead of having it kind of, you know, open, anything goes. So we are directing our life in some way and intentionally choosing where to put our time, where to put our attention, where to put resources. It also helps when there are conflicting things, right? If we have the choice to do this or this, a goal helps us decide what we actually wanted to do, right? So for an example, if I have a goal to work out 50 times in this year, right? Like, that's my goal. It's not my goal, but let's say that is my goal. And then one day I haven't done a workout that day, and a friend invites me to coffee. I might on that day decide, because of my goal, I'm actually going to prioritize going to the gym, and maybe I still meet up for that with that friend for coffee later, or you know, maybe not, maybe we organize it for a different day, but it has some way of helping us prioritize and make choices between things when we are having some sort of conflict. And it also, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but it helps us navigate that idea of, if I want certain things in my life, how do I actually get that? How do I actually navigate all the things that are going to come up, instead of just sort of letting our life be whatever, right? I posted something on Instagram recently, which was a quote by Greg, I think you say it McKeown or something, but it's from the book Essentialism, and he just says, if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. And when we don't set a goal or some sort of thing that directs our life, we are much more easily pulled around by whatever else someone else wants of us. Like, if our boss wants us to work more hours, or our friend wants us to go to coffee, or our partner wants to watch Netflix instead of go to the gym. Like, we can be pulled around by what other people want of us and what they would benefit from, and we don't have any clear sense of where we would want our life to be directed. So goals can be from more specific to more vague. And it's not necessarily that more specific is always better, but I'll go into some reasons why we might want that to be more specific. So you might choose a specific outcome, like I said, the 50 workouts this year. Like, maybe you're becoming someone who wants to be a regular exerciser. So you decide, I'm going to work out 50 times this year. You might have a financial goal. I want to save this amount of money, or I want to make this amount of money. You might have, what else? You might have a step count goal, or you might have, this is how many servings of veggies or protein that I want in my meals, or whatever it is, right? So you might have a very specific outcome. The benefit of a specific outcome is that we know whether we achieved it or not. And you might see that as a negative thing. Often when we avoid that kind of thing, it's because we can't deal with whatever comes with failing. And this is why I say, like, sometimes we are setting a goal because of all the stuff that it brings up, right? Instead of avoiding it because it's going to bring up XYZ, maybe we do it because it's going to bring up XYZ, right? Like, if you are very intolerant of failure, if you treat yourself badly or talk to yourself badly when you fail, if you feel just so disappointed, or there's so many strong emotions, if you don't achieve something, your self-esteem goes down when you don't achieve something, that in and of itself is a problem. That in and of itself is something you want to develop and grow in. So in other words, it's not the goal that was the problem there. It was that we have some work to do in terms of our internal growth. So that is why it's helpful to pick a specific outcome, because then you know whether you've done it or not, and you actually can practice setting yourself up, having the option of failing, and learning how to grapple with that, learning how to go for something even if there's a chance that you might fail, learning how to make your goal quite big, and almost like assuming that you're probably not going to achieve it, and how can it be meaningful anyway. So you're learning those skills. You might, for some reason or another, not want to set a certain outcome, right? For some people, it's like, I've set a really big goal last year, and it really kind of just like, I just want a break from that. Or like, in the past, every year I've set a goal, and I just want a year where I'm just kind of like experimenting with things, and I'm letting it be open, and I'm curious about everything. And then maybe in the future, it'll get clearer what I actually want a specific goal about. Maybe you have something big already going on this year. If you are starting a business, or transitioning into a new role, or you are becoming a mom or something like that, becoming a parent, it might be that the next year is going to be so new, and something so big is already happening. You don't really need to set a goal for that year. Maybe once you're transitioned into this new role, whatever it is, or identity, you might then have a goal. But for now, it just feels like, this is enough to just have this big change happening in my life. So sometimes you might not want to. Sometimes you might rather choose to have behaviors that you want to do more regularly. Like, instead of saying I want to work out 50 times this year, you say I just want to work out a bit more often this year, right? Or you might just choose values that you're wanting to embody. I just want to become a more disciplined person this year. Or I just want to become a more even spontaneous person this year, right? This is also where goals don't have to be in a particular direction. I think sometimes we think goals are about working harder, working more, being more rigid, being more, like all or nothing, or like inflexible, right? But if your goal is actually to become someone who is more spontaneous with their time, for example, your goal can reflect that. If you are someone who actually wants to work less, or you want to have better work-life balance, your goal can reflect that. So sometimes we have ideas about what kinds of things can be goals and what kind of things can't. So that might be one of the reasons why we are resisting setting a goal. Okay, so it's okay if it's a specific outcome or if it's just behaviors or it's values. But like I said, you want to be intentional about the reasons behind it. You don't want to just not pick an outcome because you're worried about failure or because you're worried about what it's going to take to get there. You want to be intentional about it. Okay. And by the way, you can have a combination of these. So you could say, you could go one direction or the other, right? Like you could say, I want to become a more disciplined person this year. Okay, what outcome or what goal would help me become a more disciplined person? What behaviors would help me achieve that goal or help me become that more disciplined person, right? Or you go from the other way around. Like from the outcome that I've decided on, what kinds of behaviors would I need to get there, and what kind of values do I want to be embodying while I do it, so that going to the gym instead of sleeping in later isn't just about achieving your goal. It's about, I am becoming someone who does the thing that she intended to do, or I'm becoming someone who is more disciplined, or I'm becoming someone who doesn't let herself tell herself that it doesn't matter, that she doesn't go to gym, right? So it can be a combination of those things. So when we pick an outcome, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is the most important thing. It's just some measurable way to almost like guide that goal. So we do generally want something that is appealing and is motivating to us, but think about the amount of time that you're going to spend pursuing the goal versus the amount of time you're going to spend having the outcome of the goal. Having the outcome is a very small percentage of it. So if that's the only thing that's appealing and everything on the path towards the goal is very unappealing, it's not going to be sustainable. So I like to think about it as the outcome is not the most important thing, in the sense that who we are embodying, who we are becoming, that is why my workshop is called Becoming. It's about who we are becoming on the way to setting that goal, on the way to pursuing that goal, that actually matters, right? Like that idea of like, I'm becoming the person who does XYZ. I'm becoming a X person. Something that you want to become, because then it becomes much more about the process than specifically having that outcome, which also at any point along that journey, you could just decide, oh, I actually don't want that outcome that badly. And so you can kind of blow off your goals. Whereas if it's about the person that you're becoming along the way, and if you've actually thought about why you want that outcome, then you have those compelling reasons to keep going, and there's less chance that you'll be able to just convince yourself that, oh, it doesn't actually matter. That's a common one we tend to use. Okay, so it's about our psychological growth. It's about what is called our vertical development. So the horizontal development is like your technical skills in your career, right? We all take courses on this. It's techniques, it's, diagnostic abilities, treatment abilities, all that kind of stuff. That's our horizontal development in our career. This is about our vertical development. Essentially growing up as humans, right? We are adults. We are still developing as adults. There are still certain milestones of adult psychological development that we are growing into, just as a child has milestones for their development. So when we are setting this goal, we're looking at me developing as an adult, me getting more psychologically mature, in other words. Okay. So it's about what we're choosing to prioritize and about the person that we're becoming in the process. Okay, so I think most of us can see the benefit of directing our lives in some way, of having some way of prioritizing, of identifying what actually matters to us, what's important to us, of being intentional about how we spend our time, how we spend our attention, maybe other resources, so that we actually live a life that is meaningful and that is aligned to our values and what we think is important. We can identify at least one thing that if we had to pursue that, if we had to achieve that, or even if we had to come close to achieving that, it would make so much of a difference to our quality of life or other people's quality of life, to our health, to our happiness, right? If I think of becoming someone who exercises regularly, like what difference to my life is that actually going to make, rather than it just being this arbitrary thing of like, I should exercise more, same thing about work-life balance. Like, let's stop pretending that isn't important, that it doesn't have long-term effects, that it doesn't have effects on our quality of life, on our relationships. So if we can all kind of identify, okay, I can see why it would be helpful to be intentional and to direct my life in some way. Why is it that we don't set goals? And by the way, I'm talking about goals at the beginning of January, but you could set goals at any time, right? The reason we often use the beginning of something, like the beginning of the year, the beginning of a month, the beginning of a quarter, whatever it is, beginning of a season, is because of what is known as the fresh start effect, where psychologically we are more able to do something when we feel like we're at the start of something. It gives us a certain psychological state that we're more likely to do something that changes our behavior. So it's just like, oh, I'm just going to use this effect, the psychological effect, to my advantage. But in theory, like, all of it is arbitrary, right? You can set goals at any point. Okay. So I often say, like, the reason, and I mentioned this earlier, like, the reason behind something is more important than whether or not we do it. I'm not attached to whether you set goals or don't set goals. I'm interested in the reasons behind it. I'm interested in whether you are going towards something you want, something that you feel is right for you, something that you're trusting that this is what you need, this is what you want, or are you avoiding something? Are you scared of something? Are you seeing something as a threat and you're trying to stay away from that? And whether it's pursuing a goal or not pursuing a goal, what matters to me is that it's not from a place of avoidance or fear. Okay, so sorry, just realized I said all of that already. Just have my notes here. Okay, so these are some of the things that you guys commented in the Facebook poll. Goals don't work for me, or haven't in the past. It requires me to have rigid rules. I don't care that much about achievement or money. This was also in the Instagram vote. I don't care that much about achievement or money or etc., or like whatever the specific goal is. I don't want to burn out or hustle in order to achieve something. I don't want to be that kind of person. This can come up in different ways. Like, this for me was very strong with financial goals. I didn't want to be that kind of person that cares about money, that pursues money, right? That was my resistance to setting that. So sometimes it can be an identity threat. This is the same thing as people when they want to start eating a different way, but they don't want to be that girl that like at the restaurant says like, oh no, but can I have this? And like, please leave these off and don't add this to my, you don't want to be that kind of person, or the kind of person that, when you go out for a fun night that you're not drinking. Things like I set goals, but then they don't hold much weight because they're just very informal. I set them, but I never really look at it again. This was for me. I set a goal, I think it was 2 years back. And if someone had to ask me what my goal was, I'd have no idea. And this was a common theme for me. I just sort of like set a vague goal, but then like it wasn't really that important to me. It was kind of arbitrary. So then it didn't hold any weight. It didn't direct my life, my attention, my resources. So it didn't actually achieve what I was wanting from a goal, or what I see now as the benefit of a goal. And because I sort of was doing it based on the outcome, like if it didn't feel that important to me, it was like whatever. Okay. So in other words, we have thoughts about what it means to achieve the outcome, or just setting goals in general. Like, what does it mean to set a goal? But none of those things, none of the reasons that I listed above are inherent to goals, right? Goals don't make you have rigid rules. Goals don't make you care about achievement and money over everything else, right? Goals don't make you burn out or hustle. They don't make you be that kind of person, or they don't create the resistance to a certain identity. They are not inherently informal or arbitrary. Or don't hold weight, right? Or don't direct your life. That is how we approach goals. So I just want to say that for people who have like, I want to set a goal, but it hasn't really worked for me in the past. It's usually two things, right? So the one is sometimes it's purely the strategy that we use that isn't effective. And sometimes that's because we just don't understand the science of goal setting. And this was definitely me previously, and I'm still learning about that. So for example, we might choose goals in different areas of our life because we've been told that we compartmentalize, our different areas of our life. So we have a personal goal, we have a professional goal, we have a relationship goal, we have a fitness goal, whatever it is, right? But if you think of our actual reality of our life resources, our time, our attention, our money doesn't compartmentalize. We have a certain limited amount of that, and it's going to be you're going to choose where you direct that. So it might seem like, I'm only choosing one goal in each of these things, so that should be manageable. But in reality, that's the same thing as choosing 3 goals or 4 goals in one area. So generally, I see it as a limit of 3 goals. If you can, just have 1 goal, maybe 2, but max 3. So don't be setting more than that. It can also be things like there's what's called a performance goal and what's called a learning goal. So a learning goal is something that you're doing for the first time ever. If I just set up my practice, I'm learning how to, fill up my practice, right? I'm learning how to get patients into my practice. That is something that I've never done before. It's something that I'm learning how to do. And so I wouldn't necessarily set a time limit on that. I would just identify what are the behaviors and I would set a goal for those behaviors. A performance goal is something that you've already done before, right? You know exactly what the steps are, you know how long it takes, and now you're just wanting to kind of shorten that time or increase the outcome, right? So different types of goals. We don't do things like reviewing or adapting our plan. We just kind of set it, and then at the end of the year, we're like, did we achieve it or not? If that, right? So at regular intervals, checking in on our goal, what is going well, what isn't going so well, how can we change something, how can we adapt? And sometimes we just set it and forget it. We're just like, just setting the goal is supposed to be enough. And sometimes or rather not sometimes, but that is already a benefit. Like even if you set it and forget it, there's still something in your mind that says like, this is important to me, I'm orientating in this direction. So even when we do goals imperfectly, it's not that we get 0 benefit, right? It's just we don't get the full benefit. So when we are setting goals, it's important for us to be clear on like, why am I doing this? What is important to me about this goal? If you just want a general sense of direction in your life, it may not even matter so much whether you review and you look at it each time and all of that. Okay. So sometimes it's purely just the strategy, right? Like we just, maybe need to tweak some things based on behavior change psychology or the science of goal setting, etc. Sometimes though, and this is the majority of the time, it is about our psychological immune system. So I've talked about the psychological immune system on here before. It ties into so many things. But think about there's essentially your conscious commitment to doing something, to being better at something, to improving something, to growing, to changing. And then you have your subconscious or unconscious commitment to being safe, to staying the same. Being safe often looks like staying the same. It doesn't always look like that, but essentially an unconscious commitment to safety. And these two things are always going to be in opposition to each other. We're always going to have this tension between the two. And when we are learning to become more psychologically mature, is we're learning how to allow these two things to work together. We're not trying to always power through and bulldoze over our need for psychological safety or our perceived threats. And equally, we're not just trying to have our life be driven around by our seeking safety, right? Because our safety mechanisms are very much, they are kind of, I would say over the top, but essentially that. They are overprotective. They perceive threats where maybe there isn't a threat, or they perceive the threat to be way bigger than it is. And this is helpful to us, right? Like our brain, that protective side of our brain doesn't care that much about whether we are happy and healthy and not anxious and achieving our goals and living our best lives. It's just like, just don't die. And if I need to be super protective to make you not die, I will do that, right? So we're always navigating this tension, and that is what we are learning to do when we set a goal. And when we set a goal, we come up against all of our psychological immune system, and then we get to actually deal with it. A lot of us avoid it because it brings up all that stuff about our psychological immune system, like I was saying earlier. But what if that is actually the point? What if the point is that you're growing through that you're learning how to navigate your psychological immune system? And your goal is just like the stage on which this is all playing out, right? It's just the context. Yeah, we might consciously have that desire to grow and change, but we subconsciously or unconsciously have this desire to keep ourselves safe. So growth is, like I said, being able to navigate that tension better. So think about it as goal setting is about expanding my life, expanding my options for my life, right? I don't just not do something because I don't want rules in my life, right? I don't just not do something because I'm going to burn out. I actually look at that and say, like, why is that there? Why are the behaviors there that eventually lead to burnout, or the kind of hustle behaviors? Why do I believe that that's what's necessary in order to achieve a goal, right? Why do I believe that rigid rules are the way to achieve a goal? Or why am I so resistant to rules, right? What is my psychological immune system protecting me from? These are things like status or identity, like I mentioned earlier. I don't want to be seen as a greedy person or a selfish person or a fussy person, or that person, right? Whatever judgments we have about those kinds of people. We have certainty threats, like we don't want things to be unsure and uncertain, so we'd rather choose something that we know and something that's familiar, even if we're terribly unhappy. So we have certain threats and perceived threats to our psychological immune system, and when we're in our default, we just essentially let that run our life, right? Like we just make choices based on our safety mechanisms, right? And we don't want our lives to just be completely governed by this pursuit of safety, right? It doesn't lead to a very expansive life. So we want to create options for our behavior. We want to create choice and autonomy in our behavior, rather than feeling like it's just kind of swept around by whatever emotion we feel like we're happening on that day, or whatever, we have a craving for this on that day, so we just have that, or we don't feel like working out on that day, so we just don't. We don't want to just be swept around by that. But like I said, we're also not bulldozing over that. So if you think about goals as about growth, our psychological growth, who you are becoming in the process of achieving that goal, and not so much about the outcome itself. That is what we will be exploring in the workshop. So I hope you will join me on at the end of Jan, 27th and 28th. That's a Monday and a Tuesday. We'll be doing 6 to 7 p.m. SA time, and it's called Becoming for that reason. And yeah, we'll have time for some questions and coaching and all of that, but it'll be very practical. Like you will actually have a goal by the end of it, and you'll know why you chose that goal. You'll have a meaningful reason behind that, and know what the reason is for you that you're actually pursuing that, and be guided as to how to choose that. And then also the actual process of it, like this is what is going to be required. This is what it feels like. Ugh. This is what I'm resisting. For example, if you think that it's going to be just like this very inflexible plan, like let's look at that. Let's look at how we can navigate that aspect of your psychological immune system. If there's an identity threat that you're perceiving with a certain goal, let's look at that. And let's look at those sort of real and perceived barriers to your goal. Another thing that we often do is like we just don't anticipate where we're going to fail, right? Like if you had to think of this year, like let's say you set a goal and then next year this time I asked you if you set your goal and you said no. If you achieved your goal and you said no, I failed at that goal. What is likely to be the reason? What are likely to be the obstacles that are going to come up? Like often we know those things. We know what is likely to throw us off track, but we don't plan for those things. So planning for the barriers both mentally and in real life, right? And yeah, I will link that in this live. I will see you guys there and have a wonderful evening.